All right, today we're going to dive deep into the story behind a story. We're talking about Tony Bradman's amazing historical novel, Viking Boy. We're going to look at how it all came together, what makes it such a page-turner, and how it grew into something, well, even bigger.
And really, let's just start with the author's own philosophy, because it says it all. It's so simple, right? But this idea, just tell a good story and leave out the boring parts, that's the engine driving every single thing in Viking Boy. It's all about the thrill of the narrative, not some dry history lesson.
So here's the game plan for today. We're going to start with where the inspiration came from in the first place, the author's own childhood. Then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the plot itself. After that, we'll explore the craft of mixing history and story, see its incredible ripple effect in schools, and finally, we'll uncover how this one story sparked a whole new way of looking at nonfiction. You know, every great story has its own origin story. And for Viking Boy, it all starts way back, with a young kid just discovering how magical the past could be. It's so cool to see how all these different threads just wove themselves together. It was never just one thing, you know? It was the pure fantasy of hearing The Hobbit read out loud, stumbling upon these gritty historical novels in the library, and then these real-life trips to see actual Roman artifacts. But here's the real kicker. He later figured out that Tolkien, the absolute master of fantasy, was also a world-class scholar of the exact history he loved. That link, that bridge between myth and fact, that became the foundation for everything.
Okay, so with all that inspiration bubbling up, what did the book actually become? Well, at its core, Viking Boy is a timeless, powerful, classic story of revenge, and it's all centered on our young hero, Gunnar.
The plot is just pure high-stakes adrenaline. I mean, it starts with this absolutely devastating tragedy, which pushes Gunnar to swear a blood oath, a promise he doesn't even fully get at the time, but he feels it deep in his bones. That one oath just catapults him on this massive journey across the entire Viking world, and he has to grow from a boy into a warrior. And you know it all leads to that epic final showdown that every great adventure needs. And this image, it just gets right to the heart of the world Gunnar gets thrown into. This is not some romantic, clean version of the past. No way. It's a brutal, dangerous, and totally unpredictable world where staying alive comes down to pure strength, loyalty, and maybe a little bit of luck. The book never, ever shies away from that brutality, and honestly, that's what makes it feel so incredibly real. So this leads to the big question, right? How do you take all that gritty, brutal history and shape it into a story that kids are actually going to want to pick up and read? That is the ultimate challenge of writing good historical fiction. This is really the million-dollar question for anyone writing about the past. I mean, it's one thing to have all your facts straight, but it's a completely different game to make your audience actually feel what it was like to be there. The secret, it turns out, is all about shifting your focus. The old way of teaching history can feel like, just a long list of dates and artifacts. But Bradman's approach, he drops you right into the middle of the chaos. By creating a character like Gunnar, he lets us experience what he calls the enormous jeopardy and danger of that time through the eyes of a kid. It's all about empathy. It's about the lived experience, not the lecture. And you don't have to take my word for it. The author himself just nailed it with this quote. The goal isn't to just dump a ton of information on the reader. It's about carefully choosing what you include. The research is there to make the world feel authentic and believable, not to be the star of the show. The story always comes first. Now, this focus on story over facts has had this massive and maybe even unexpected side effect. The book isn't just a bestseller, it's become this absolute powerhouse of a teaching tool in classrooms. It's actually incredible when you see how it all plays out. In schools like Leaderton Primary, Viking Boy becomes this launchpad for so many different subjects. Kids in English class are writing newspaper articles about Schooley's attack. In art, they're building their own model longships. They're even using CAD software and computing to design 3D Viking longhouses. A single book just sets off this explosion of learning across the entire curriculum. And you can see it right here. The story literally jumps off the page and inspires kids to build, to design, to create. It turns history from something you just read about in a dusty book into something you can actually touch and feel and do. It makes the past tangible. So, the book's success in making history come alive led to this absolutely brilliant new idea. What if there was a companion book that kind of flipped the whole thing on its head? So, what even is a nonfiction companion? Well, it's a super clever idea. Instead of just a regular old encyclopedia of Viking facts, it uses the characters and the plot that you already know and love as your gateway to the real history behind it all. And here's the genius twist. The original novel, Viking Boy, is a classic adventure story told about Gunnar. But in the nonfiction book, Viking Boy, the Real Story, Gunnar himself becomes our narrator. He's talking directly to us in the first person, explaining his life and his world.
This idea, which actually came from an editor, was the absolute key. It completely transforms a subject that could be dry into this personal guided tour. So instead of some anonymous historian telling you about the Viking Age, your guide is the actual hero whose journey you've already been on. It makes the facts feel every bit as exciting as the fiction. So we want to leave you with this thought. By blurring the lines between a fictional guide and real-world facts, this series really challenges how we think about learning. It makes you wonder, maybe the best way to understand the past isn't through a lecture at all, but through a story. Could it be that a character we truly care about can teach us more than a textbook ever could? It's a pretty powerful question about the deep, deep connection between stories, empathy, and what it really means to learn.